In return, you will enter a plea of no contest to counts 3 and 4, which are accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. YNW Bortlen did more than simply accept a plea. He gave the keys to Melly's death row cell to the prosecution. Word has now spread from the jailhouse that something happened in his cell, with rumors suggesting Melly's demise. Is Melly truly at fault? What did he want to conceal that led to his abrupt demise following Bortlen's trial? Did he go to the extreme lengths to avoid being sentenced? Let's dissect it. The streets have never witnessed betrayal quite like this, family, when your first child turns into a snitch. The hip-hop community saw something on September 9, 2025, that contradicts all of the culture's ideals. When your day one friend, your own blood, betrays you in exchange for a lower sentence. Cortland Malik Henry, also known as YNW Bortlen, accepted a plea deal that did more than merely protect him. It might have buried YNW Melly, his childhood friend, 6 feet under. We must now return to the origins of these cats in order to fully comprehend how frigid this scenario is. Melly and Bortlen grew up in Gulfport, Florida. I'll put you to the test on what kind of neighborhood that is if you're not from there. This was no playground in the suburbs. In order to survive in these trenches, you had to always have your friends' backs. The kind of location where you don't just rap about loyalty. It really is a matter of life or death. Melly, who was born on May 1, 1999, had a difficult time growing up on Jump Street. He had to cope with family strife, get his ass kicked by his stepfather, and see violence before he reached puberty. That kind of upbringing can either shatter you or make you more resilient than concrete. Melly began spitting bars when he was about 9 or 10 years old. His escape from the chaos was through music. Through mutual friends in the neighborhood, these two young people connected as teenagers and bonded over that common hardship. Having someone who is sympathetic to your suffering feels different when you are at your lowest. They were brothers forged in that fire that only the streets could produce, not simply buddies. By 2014 or 2015, when they were in their mid-teens, they had joined forces with Christopher YNW Juvie Thomas Jr. and Anthony Y. Sackhazer Williams to form the YNW group. With Melly serving as the operations face and Bortlen serving as his right hand, what had begun as a small group of young hustlers freestyling and releasing music on SoundCloud grew into something more. This wasn't your average rap group, it was family. Melly consistently referred to them as his brothers in interviews and on social media. The crew supported Melly after he was charged with firearms in 2015 at the age of 16. When you're truly riding with your people, that's how it should be. They were also quite serious about their music game. They were fusing the emo rap style that was making waves in the streets with melodic trap. Melly Bortlen, YNW BA Slime, and even Trippie Redd were included in The Mob, one of their most significant collaborations from 2022. With bars like We, The Mob, and We Don't Fold, that song was all about street life and loyalty. It was incredibly ironic given what was going to occur. However, when the money began to come, the streets began to feel something about even the purest relationships can be tainted by jealousy and greed when you come from nothing and suddenly get bread. There were rumors circulating regarding internal conflicts, possibly related to fame or money. However, no one anticipated what transpired on October 26, 2018. Everything changed that night. Shots were fired while the 4 of them were in a rented Jeep following a late-night studio session in Fort Lauderdale. The prosecution claims that Melly fired rounds from the rear seat, striking Juvie and Sackhazer, driving the bodies to the hospital while portraying the victim. Bortlen then assisted in staging the entire scene to resemble a drive-by. On February 13, 2019, Melly wrote on his Instagram account, "I will never turn my back on my brother. The YW family will never stop talking about Portland when the cops arrive for them. Now that I know what was going to happen, that post has a different impact." It appeared to be 2 soldiers prepared to take on any challenge together at the time. True street code type _, however, this is where the plot twists. Bortlen took the fifth and remained silent during Melly's initial trial, which began on June 12, 2023. while others saw it as loyalty. The truth was that he was merely defending himself. The case wasn't as strong as the day believed, as seen by the mistrial that resulted from the jury's deadlock of 9-3 for acquittal. The feds weren't finished, though. Both Bortlen and Melly were charged with witness tampering in 2021 for allegedly attempting to buy off Melly's ex-girl in order to silence her. In October 2023, they were detained again for the same _, indicating that they were still attempting to circumvent the system as a group. Bortlen had been free on a $4 million bond since May 2020, but Melly remained incarcerated the entire time, likely caused him to reconsider making a life bid in support of someone else's choices. Bortlen faced a significant amount of time since his trial was scheduled to begin on September 10, 2025, 75 years in addition to many life sentences. The feds know exactly how to apply the escalating pressure. The day loyalty in the YNW camp died on September 9, 2025. Entering the Broward County courtroom, Bortlen entered a plea that reduced his murder charges to accessory after the fact. This may be home in less than 4 years, 10 years in prison, with credit for time served plus 6 years of probation. However, what came with the small punishment was worse than the penalty itself. Bortlen had to collaborate as part of the plea agreement, which essentially established Melly's guilt. Every code they were raised with in Gill was broken by this. Now, let's discuss YNW Bortlen and YNW Melly right now. He's performing the triple Lindy. He will flip when you perform multiple flips off a high dive. He will share everything he knows about the double case, and when he makes his complete quote-unquote confession about what transpired that night, they will be able to detect if he is telling the truth or lying. As soon as Bortlen did the triple Lindy, the streets began to talk about it. In other words, he was going to perform every kind of flip imaginable in order to save his own skin. This went beyond simple collaboration. It was full-fledged snitching. And that's what frequently occurs when men are incarcerated for 4 or 5 years while awaiting trial and facing a life sentence, only to be offered a 10-year term that will likely allow them to return home in 3 more years. He makes the decision to change and start eating cheese. And that's what frequently occurs in these situations. The legal expert described it precisely as such. Bortlen started eating cheese, rat slang from the hood. He finally gave in to the pressure and decided to save his own advertisement after suppressing it for years. People on social media started talking about how Bortlen done everything he could for Melly, but didn't sign up for it right away. The survival instinct was known by some, but there was disagreement in the society over whether it was essential or not. The courtroom scene was also chaotic. Even Judge Martin Fine was aware that this bargain was extremely advantageous when he said to Bortlen, "I'm not quite sure how your lawyers managed to do this, but I wish you good luck, sir." Bortlen was out here grinning for the cameras while being fingerprinted after entering the plea, demonstrating his satisfaction at saving his own ass. Bortlen was required to meet with prosecutors and provide all of his information as part of the deal's proffer obligation. Even though his attorney attempted to minimize the situation by stating that he would not directly testify against Melly, the harm had already been done. The entire story had changed. This was no ordinary case of a snitch. This was a childhood friend who had experienced the same hardship and had abandoned him when it was most important. One of the most heinous betrayals the game has ever witnessed was what had formerly been YNW Family Forever. The strain of a possible life sentence was too much for the friendship formed on the streets of Gulfport. The federal government's receipts were unbeatable. Now let's be honest about why this folded like a lawn chair before we start labeling Bortlen as a complete rat. Even the most seasoned street troops would have been searching for a way out of the case that the feds had constructed. The prosecution wasn't weak at all. They presented evidence that would make anyone reconsider going to trial. You were persuaded to enter a plea on the forensic evidence alone. Juvie received 6 shots when the medical examiner explained how the bodies were struck. 10 lit up Sackhazer. That was enough to convey an image of severe violence. However, their entire tale was really up by the ballistics. Because Christopher Thomas was what we would call collapsing. He was already dead when these rounds entered the back of the car. If you will, he was beginning to fall. Additionally, I'm aware that he was already dead because there is almost no blood in the rounds in the rear of his body. This isn't a drive-by shooting, I decided. When all but one of these rounds are fired, the shooter is still. Their drive-by tale was totally refuted by the ballistics, which revealed the victim was shot from within the... She described getting that hysterical phone call from Melly at the hospital, but noted how his behavior seemed off afterwards, like he was putting on an act. Well, it seems like the forensics is thinking their story is there were two shootings. There was a shooting inside the car coming from the rear passenger seat where Melly was sitting, and then there was another shooting into the car from the right-hand side, right? So those are the two shootings involved in this incident. The shootings from the outside in, they did hit of the bodies, but it's been shown that the bodies were already dead. The DNA evidence was mixed, but it still supported the prosecution's theory. While they couldn't definitively link Melly to shell casings or blood, there was a 1 in 1,000 chance that DNA on the rear door handle wasn't his. That puts him in the exact spot where the shooter would have been sitting. The gang expert testimony was some real street that hit different in court. Detective Danny Polo broke down how YW was connected to Shine Bloods, showing photos and videos of Melly throwing up gang signs and using blood terminology. This wasn't just rap personas. This was real street affiliation that gave context to why the murders might have happened. The motive angle was where things got really street. Word was that Sackhazer had been getting too close to Melly's mom, which was a major violation in their circle. In the hood, that type of disrespect can get you touched, especially when you're dealing with young who don't think straight when they feel betrayed. The forensics, they don't think so. From the angles of the bullets, from the trajectory of the rounds, from the stippling, it looks like it all came from the same gun. So all of the bullets came from a singular point in the rear driver's side. According to the forensic what we have now, the staging of the crime scene showed these cats thought they were smarter than the police. After the initial shooting, they fired more shots into the car from outside to make it look like a drive-by. They even had a shell casing in a plastic bag trying to plant evidence. But when you're dealing with federal investigators and forensic scientists, that amateur hour ain't going to work. The most incriminating evidence came straight from Melly's own social media. Instagram DM showing him saying, "Shay, I did that," on October 26, 2018. The same day as the murders was basically a confession in the Fed's eyes. That's the type of digital evidence that destroys any reasonable doubt a jury might have. The witness tampering charges made everything worse. Both of them trying to pay off witnesses and intimidate people from testifying showed consciousness of guilt. When you're offering 50 bands to keep somebody quiet, that tells the jury, you did something wrong. The first trial ending in a mistrial with 9 jurors voting to convict on manslaughter showed the evidence was strong enough to convince most people. This wasn't a jury that thought these was innocent. It was a jury that couldn't agree on whether it was first-degree murder or a lesser charge. For Bortlen, looking at all this evidence, the math was simple. He was facing multiple life sentences plus 75 years across all his charges. Even if he beat the murder rap, the witness tampering and gang charges could still put him away forever. His lawyer, Fred Haddad, kept it real about the situation. It's a hard decision to make. Regardless of what you think about your chances at trial, regardless of how strong your case is, you're looking at life. That's lawyer speak from my client and this plea deal is the only way he sees sunlight. Again, the key difference between Melly and Bortlen's situations was their roles. The prosecution painted Bortlen as the driver and accomplice, while Melly was the alleged triggerman. In the eyes of the law, that made Bortlen's position more negotiable. He could flip on the shooter and walk away with a fraction of the time. The feds built this case like a fortress: forensics, digital evidence, witness testimony, gang connections, and behavioral evidence all pointing in one direction. Even the strongest street soldiers would have been looking for an exit when faced with this type of overwhelming proof. Bortlen just happened to be the one smart enough to take the deal when it was offered. The fallout when your right hand goes left. The aftermath of Bortlen's snitching sent shockwaves through the hip-hop community that's still rippling today. This wasn't just any cooperation case. This was a childhood friend turning state's evidence against his day one, completely obliterating the street code that both these claimed to live by. Melly, now 26 and pushing over 2,400 days behind bars without a conviction, is facing a reality that most street never recover from. His retrial got pushed all the way back to January 2027, and now he got to face that courtroom knowing his own homie might be the star witness against him. The legal implications of Bortlen's cooperation is some real game-changing. What that proved is that they came in. Bortlen worked with someone after he acknowledged that a murder took place in trying to cover it up. When pleading to accessory to murder after the fact, you have to acknowledge that the murder happened and you assisted someone or in some way to cover the murder. Now, if Melly's statement is, how do we know there was a murder? And then, secondly, how do we know who did the murder? 'Cause they said it was a drive-by. How the hell would Bortlen help anybody but the person he know? How would he help the random guys who did a drive-by? That won't even make sense. That breakdown right there shows how Melly's defense strategy is now. By coping to accessory charges, Bortlen basically admitted the murders happened and that he helped cover them up. So all that talk about it being a drive-by or denying murders even occurred is dead in the water. Family attorney John Phillips put it bluntly on social media. As predicted, YNW Bortlen took the plea deal. He also agreed to a proffer, which means he's talking. The proper requirement means Bortlen got to sit down with prosecutors and give up everything he knows. Every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence that could bury Melly deeper. But there's still some confusion about how far Bortlen's cooperation going to go. His lawyer, Joseph Nascimento, tried to play it down, saying Bortlen won't have to testify in Melly's retrial. Fred Haddad went even harder, saying, I don't represent snitches, trying to make it seem like the cooperation is limited. The streets ain't buying that, though. Once you cooperate with the feds, you cross a line that can't be uncrossed. Whether he testifies or not, Bortlen already gave the prosecution what they needed to strengthen their case against Melly. The courtroom scenes from Melly's previous trial show how this betrayal been building for years. Victim's mother, Leandra Phillips, wasn't having none of Melly's courtroom antics. I walked out because I don't want you praying for because you sitting over there like you ain't got no remorse. Like every time I walk in, you smiling. You know this ain't the time for that. This case is sad. This is serious. The families of Sackhazer and Juvie got mixed feelings about Bortlen's plea, while they want some type of accountability. Seeing Bortlen potentially walk free in 4 years for his role in their son's murders ain't sitting right with them either. The hip-hop community been divided on this whole situation. Social media was calling it a Gunner-style plea, referring to how Gunner took an offered plea in the YSL RICO case. Some people understand the survival instinct when you're facing life, but others see it as breaking the most sacred rule of the streets. Melly's mom, Jamie Demons King, been active on Instagram throughout this whole ordeal, fighting for her son and maintaining his innocence. After the mistrial, she claimed the jury voted 9-3 for acquittal, though that was later disputed. Now she got to watch her son fight this case, knowing his childhood friend turned on it. The legal challenges Melly facing go way beyond just the murder charges. He still got witness tampering charges in a separate case with a pretrial meeting set for December 2024. Even if he beat the murder rap, these other charges could still keep him locked up for years. Melly's jail conditions been another source of controversy. He'd been claiming inhumane treatment and filing lawsuits about his rights being violated during this long pretrial detention. Spending over 6 years locked up without a conviction is cruel and unusual punishment by any standard. In August 2025, Melly switched up his legal team, bringing in big-time lawyers Drew Finneling and Carrie Hoffwout. Finneling got a reputation for defending high-profile hip-hop artists. So, this move showed Melly was getting serious about his defense strategy. The cultural impact of this case reaches way beyond the courtroom. Melly's 2017 track, Murder on My Mind, been at the center of debates about using rap lyrics as evidence. That song got over 1 billion streams and stays trending on TikTok, keeping the case in the public eye. Fans been split down the middle on whether Melly guilty or innocent. Some see the evidence and his lyrics as proof he did it, while others maintain his innocence and point to the lack of direct proof. The frustration with this case dragging on for over 6 years is real across both sides. Looking ahead to January 2027, Melly facing an uphill battle that just got steeper. The prosecution now has Bortlen's cooperation to validate their story about what really happened that night. Even if Bortlen don't take the stand, his admissions in the proffer can be used to strengthen the case. The stakes couldn't be higher for this young Nick. If convicted, Melly facing